Hey everyone, in this video I want to talk about controlling the different tooling options we have for Azure and also some of the other Microsoft Cloud solutions. Because often I want to control aspects and elements of the overall management experience. Maybe I want to stop certain people using the portals. Maybe I want to stop certain people from using any of the control plane. And the reason I might want to do this is maybe we have certain service principals, certain credentials that we want to use for a very specific purpose. Maybe I have a credential that I use only for infrastructure deployments. It's calling an ARM template, it's pushing a bicep file. And I don't want that to be used in the portal, for example. Or maybe I have another service principal that's only used for data plane, like connecting to a database, and it shouldn't interact with anything at the control plane at all. Now, if I don't have roles at those levels, I can't do much anyway, but maybe I just want to be super sure and restrict that. Because if we think about it, Azure has its own control plane. So we'll have our nice little Azure Cloud. And the key thing is for all of the interactions with creating resources, modifying a resource, deleting, well, we have to go through the control plane. And the control plane for Azure is the Azure Resource Manager, or ARM. And everything goes through this. Because it's at this control plane, things like role-based access control, policy, you name it, any other things I may have, this is where it's enforced. And the benefit of having that is it doesn't matter what tooling I'm using. If I was using the Azure portal, if I was using the AZ CLI, or the PowerShell module. If I was using REST directly, I'm using maybe an SDK, or I'm directly using those REST calls, every single one of those still go through the Azure Resource Manager to ensure there isn't any way I can bypass those controls in some way. So there is no backdoor to bypass ARM. And so now if I think about, I have this control plane that everything goes through, maybe the first thing I want to do is just restrict access to this. I want to block that access. And as we might imagine, if we jump over for a second and we go and look, I can use conditional access. So if I look at my protection, conditional access, and we'll just pick a certain policy that I've already created down here. I've created one down here called Deny ARM Control Plane. And what we're targeting here is a particular resource, and specifically this targeted resource, I'm selecting Microsoft Azure Management. So this is one of those, if we go and look at all the different cloud applications that's available to us, one of those is just the Microsoft Azure Management. We can see that right there. So I can target that particular policy. And the key point here is that Microsoft Azure Management. So if I think about, well, okay, what are my controls? So this first policy I could use, Microsoft Azure Management, that target application is targeting the control plane. So that means when I restrict access using that target app, I'm targeting the control plane, which means my scope of influence is anything that uses that control plane. So the portal, the AZ CLI, the various Azure AZ PowerShell modules, if I'm trying to use REST directly, which means also if I'm doing infrastructure as code deployments using Bicep or ARM or even third party, they're still going to go through the control plane. It could also impact other services, that require some control plane interaction. So this can be very, very far-reaching. Now, one thing I would say, though, is it's only targeting the Azure Resource Manager control plane. It is not going to interact with things like Microsoft Graph. The Microsoft Graph is a completely different endpoint, a completely different API. So this policy has no impact on Microsoft Graph at all. So this is definitely one way I could achieve this. However, we have to consider there are other cloud properties. So there's also obviously the various Entra services. I could also think, well, there's Exchange Online, there's Microsoft 365, there's things like Microsoft Purview, and there are others. There's also security, dashboards, there are other administrative centers, and they're going to build up over time. So what about if what I really want to do is block the various portals? Because there are also a whole set of portals going to all of these. So each of these have their own portal. So we've got other portals here going to all these various wonderful different services to do that services administration. And maybe my goal here is the example I talked about earlier. It's not that I want to block the entire control plane. I still maybe want to be able to do infrastructure as code. I maybe still want to do automation using the AZ CLI or PowerShell, but I don't want people going into the portals. The portal is maybe too easy to go and click and change things. I want to force people through a certain direction that, hey, no, you need to be using infrastructure as code. You need to be using the CLI. I don't want you using the graphical interfaces. So maybe that is my requirement. And for that requirement, if I switch over to a different policy, there's another application we can target, specifically Microsoft Admin Portals. And so as that name suggests, now we have another option. And what we're now going to do with this policy is we have this new capability. I'll actually draw it down the bottom here. Now we're going to have this policy of Microsoft Admin Portals. And its scope of effect is this. So from the Azure perspective, it is not targeting the control plane. It's only focusing on the Azure portal specifically. And I guess I should draw out this was its scope of influence. So the overlap on the Azure portal, but now I can decide what is it I'm trying to achieve. If I want to just block out the control plane of Azure, hey, Microsoft Azure Management. If I don't want to block out the control plane, and instead I want to block out the nice intuitive portal, well, now I have this other option, so I get a much finer granularity. And of course, the beauty here is I'm blocking the portal, but people could still go and use AZ CLI. They could still deploy a template. They could still deploy a bicep file. They could still deploy Terraform. They still have all of those options available. So this is one of those things where I think it's nicer to see it so we can understand the differences in the interaction. So if we jump back over, what I have configured is firstly 3 groups. And my groups are all based around denying certain things. So we have this idea of denying ARM, denying the admin portals, and then denying admin portal exception. Because there may be break glass scenarios where I need someone to be able to access the portal for a short time, but ordinarily they should be blocked. So I have 3 groups. From those 3 groups, we create 2 conditional access policies. And we saw them. The first one is to deny the ARM control plane. So all we do here is we target the deny ARM group. Our target resource is Microsoft Azure Management, which remember is the control plane. And all we're doing for the grant is block access. So this is going to block anyone in that group from using ARM. And then our other policy is deny the admin portals, exactly the same, but this time we're including the deny admin portals group, but also we've added an exclude. So we've added a deny admin portals exception. So if I add them to the exception group and they were in the regular deny admin portals, well, they'll be able to access it. And then this time we just target admin portals. And once again, we're going to block it. So that's how we're going to control that access. So now let's go and look at one of our users. And we're going to look at Bruce Wayne. And specifically, we're going to go and look at the various groups they are in. And right now, they're not in any of those special deny groups we talked about before. So let's just, as Bruce Wayne, we can do a few things. So what I want to do, firstly, is I'm going to do connect AZ account. And what that's going to flag over, actually, let me just close that down for a second. Let's open up a browser window. So this is as Bruce Wayne, make that the focus. And then we'll go back to this again. So we run that one more time. So we do a connect AZ account. And we'll say, yes, we want to log in as Bruce Wayne. We'll approve that. So that authentication is complete. And I am authenticated. Great. So that all works just fine. And obviously also as Bruce Wayne, I could do things like portal.azure.com. So close that down. So now let's look at the first policy. So all we're going to do is add Bruce into the deny ARM. Now this takes maybe 10, 20 seconds. I need to wait for it to have actually showed up before I can then go and retest it. So we're going to wait for that new membership. So now it's there. We can see we've got our deny ARM. So now as Bruce Wayne, well, we could do a few things. Let's go to the portal again. Pick my account. And now it's blocked. You don't have permission to access this resource. Okay, seems kind of mean, but we'll accept that. If I now go back to the PowerShell module and connect again, pick an account, sure, it's not going to let me. So I can't access from the portal, and I can't access now from the Azure PowerShell module. It's blocked both of those things because I'm now part of that particular group. So if we go back, so let's remove that assignment. Remove. And this time, we'll go ahead and add them to just the portal one. So again, we're going to give it a second, make sure that actually takes effect. So now we can see, that's not right. There we go. Deny admin portal. So if I go back now as Bruce, well, the first thing, let's see, can I get to the Azure portal? Pick my account. No, it's blocked, which we would expect. But now let's try and do my connect again. Now it works. So you can see the difference in exactly what is happening here. One of them is impacting that entire control plane that we had here. The other is only impacting portals. Now, what if I had that break glass scenario? What if, look, I need to access the portal. Ordinarily, this credential shouldn't, but I've got some error. I need to be able to go into the portal, maybe view something, do something to fix it, help me understand the issue. So remember, we had that other group. So one option I could absolutely do is add them into the deny exception group. And we'll give it that little bit of time again. So now they're included in both the group that applies the policy and the group we specified as an exception to the policy. And the exception will always take precedence. So now I'm a member of that group as well. So if I jump over back as Bruce, and now we try and add in our portal.azure.com. That's weird. So I think what's happened right now, let's try that one more time. I'm in the middle, I suspect, of changes filtering through into Azure Active Directory. Or I should say Microsoft Entra ID. Yeah, and now it works. So I was just in some weird middle state as the change of the group membership was propagating out. So I've got the access again. Okay, fantastic. Let's remove this exception. So it's blocked again. So let's just double check it really is blocked one more time. And again, it may take a little second, but if I go to my portal and Bruce, nope, this is going to take a second. Try it one more time. Yep, now it's blocked again. Good. I don't really want the administrator manually having to go and add people to that exception group, then remove them from the exception group. Because what happens is you forget. They'll get left in the exception group and it breaks the whole point. If only we had a feature that was really useful for temporarily granting someone a role or group membership. Privileged identity management. So we can leverage that. So what I've now done is that exact same group, the deny admin portals exception. If I look at my identity governance and privileged identity management, so I'm going to go here and groups, I have onboarded that group into PIM. Remember, to onboard a group, all we have to do is we do a discover, we select the group, and then we say we're going to enable it for PIM. Once I do that, well, firstly, there are settings. I can define settings for, hey, if you want to be a member, what is required? Do you require approval? So I could absolutely set this up as requiring an approval. I require a justification, so there'll be a nice audit trail for me to be able to go and see this. I can see a maximum duration. So they're not going to get added to the group and forgotten about and keep it forever. So there's a huge set of benefits to using PIM. And then I can assign it. So what I can do here is eligible. Hey, Bruce is one of those people. John Saville, Clark Kent. They're eligible for a duration of time. So they're eligible for a year that they can elevate up when they need that group membership. So now Bruce just needs to elevate up to be able to use that. Now, obviously, they can't go into the portal right now because they're blocked from using the portals. So what I'm going to do is, well, Bruce was right here. And so I'm going to use the management, the Microsoft Graph. So if I do connect MG Graph, welcome to the graph. If I do my get MG context, we can see I am Bruce Wayne. And now all I'm going to do is run a little command. So I'm going to do activate PIM, and then a message. I need to get portal access. Big problems. So I am activating. So that's a little script that I wrote. It's not doing anything particularly fancy, but what it's doing is it's activating, it's elevating up that particular role. So you can see that that completed. So I've elevated up. Now, all that script does, I'll show it to you super quick. It's in my random stuff. It takes one parameter, and the parameter is going to end up being the message. I'm using, at this point, the identity governance PowerShell module. I'm getting my user ID, and then I'm just creating the JSON payload, and the group ID is that particular group, that exception group. It's a self-activation. I'm doing it from right now for 2 hours. So I'm adding 2 hours to the current time. And then the justification is the message, and I just call the request. This handy dandy, super friendly story that is the command name. And that's all it's done. And now if I go and look at my active assignments, there's Bruce, so I can see it's been activated. I can always go and look at the resource audit, so I got a full tracking of everything that's happening here. So I can see Bruce making the request, and notice I could see the reason is kept there. I can see the date. Yes, it's 4:30 in the morning on Sunday. This is when I record. I can see the detail, and the next one will be the addition actually succeeded. So now they have the group. If I was to now go and look at Bruce and the groups, they have that membership, but it will automatically disappear in 2 hours. They only have it for that 2 hour period. But the upshot of this is now Bruce, even though under the deny, can get back to the portal. And that's the whole point. So I had them blocked, but using the nice PIM capability. And I wrote a PowerShell script. It doesn't have to be a PowerShell script. You could do anything you wanted to do that. It could be your own ITSM tool. It could be a little portal. You do a different portal to raise requests and elevate. In just, you saw that tiny little script. I could make them be able to self-elevate. So that's the approach I took using the Microsoft Graph, partly because I wanted to show off the new Microsoft Graph and how I could do PIM things from the Microsoft Graph. So again, the link to that's in the description below. But that's it. I mean, you saw every single element. And again, the beauty of this scenario is that membership of the exception group will disappear automatically in 2 hours. Or I could now say, hey, I don't need it anymore, and deactivate to stop it instantly. But those are our options. So the idea being, if I want to block anything related to the Azure control plane, but realize it could impact other services as well. It's not just these tools, there are other services that may use that control plane, and the documentation goes through those, again, linked in the description. Be aware of that. This can be pretty impactful, blocking the entire control plane. But if I want to, I have some service principal that only want to do data plane operations, for example. And again, maybe it's an exception. I enable the control plane. Hey, Microsoft Azure Management. If I don't want to mess with the control plane completely because I still want to run automations, I still want to do deployments of JSON templates or Terraform or Bicep, then I don't want to use that one, but I could block the portals using Microsoft admin portals. And as we saw, if I need to, I can always have an exception group that I add people into. If you do it manually, strong chance you're going to forget and leave them there. So hey, PIM is a really nice way. And you saw the user could self-elevate up. They gave a justification reason. I could have had an approver if I needed that. So before it activated, someone actually say, yes, they're allowed to do this. It's some exception. There's some call to worker problem happening. Then they could get the Azure portal for 2 or 8 hours, whatever they want, up to my maximum. And it will automatically be removed afterwards. So I thought that was a bit of fun. I hope that was interesting. Until next video, take care.